we're starting with chapter 8, the establishment of the kingdom. We stopped with the judges, and we're starting now with the kingdom. Biblical history can be very interesting. It's not the same as a country's history. It's totally different. So here we come. We stop by the judges. So it went now. Actually, as we can say, it started. It started by everything from Adam and Eve and how it developed through Abram and all those people. And the judge, they decided, okay, no, they don't want to lead on a Christ anymore. They want to go now for the judges, and now, okay, now they want kings. Now they want the monarch. Okay, so let's see. Discontent among the Israelites led to the demand for a king, as I said. Poverty continued exist in the land. Now, if you think about it, remember that Israel was one of the nations. Now, what's the problem? Poverty. Why is there poverty? They pulled away from Christ. Okay? Although Samuel opposed the establishment of a monarchy, the Israel's fortune was reversed under David, the second king. David was the second king. Israel became one of the ranking world powers, as I said just now, one of these powers. Israel did not remain in this position for a long time, but this brief period of glory signifies the effect of Israel, theological and future hope. There was hope, because they had a king. First it was God the king, and that everything went well, and then they want a king, a human king. I wish I could be king, so I can also have all this fancy things. And a queen. The doctrines of the kingdom of God, the Messiah, salvation, deliverance, and defeat of the kingdom of Satan were affected directly by the establishment of the monarchy. Okay? Can we see the leadership of Samuel? The Ark of the Covenant was kept in Shiloh, indicating that this sanctuary was the central shrine of the Israelite tribes. Eli was a priest of Shiloh. Then he had his two sons. Now, if you do it in a graph, you must look at it in a graph. You've got Eli and his two sons. The two sons, Zebuli and Phinehas.
Yes.
His sons were associated with him, but because of their undisciplined and immoral lives, they were unfit for priest services. We read it as 1 Samuel 2 verse 22. Now, just think of it. Samuel was God's call, and his two sons was so disrupted with other stuff and undisciplined and immoral lives that they couldn't go on with the godly stuff. You understand? If you just think of it, how godly the people was, and there was immorality and undisciplined. Now, because their life was more lacquer, because Samuel had more money, not money, more possessions, he had more rights. So let's see. Eli was informed that both his sons would die. Sorry, not Samuel, it was Eli. I'm sorry. I just take the words right. It's not Samuel, it's Eli. Eli. Eli was informed that both his sons would die on the same day, as faithful priests would be selected to lead God's people. So Eli had the two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and then it was prophesied that Eli's sons, these two, will die on the same day, and then a leader will be chosen by God. This prediction was fulfilled in a battle of Philistine. This in Epic. So the Philistines in Epic of 1 Samuel 4 verse 1, this prophesied that was given to Eli, that his sons will die, is fulfilled in that battle. With this battle, 30,000 Israelite troops died. Eli died with the receipt of the report that the ark was captured, and his two sons died. The shock was just too big. Eli died when his sons died and the ark was captured, because the ark was the central mark of Israel. And there were 30,000 Israelites that passed away, that died. Now just think of it, the ark was the one that took them, out of Egypt, And that was the main part. That was the symbol of God. The Philistines, now just listen to what the Philistines did to that ark. First they took it to the Ashdod, then to Gath, then to Ekron, and it might be taken also, they reckon it was taken to Gaza as well as Ashkelon, or what called Ashkelon, or so. I'm not sure about the pronunciations, as you know. Samuel was the faithful priest whom the Lord promised to raise up. So who was then the chosen one? It was Samuel. So totally was that part of Eli rub. That was like a rubber, totally. His descendants was out. So then we see, okay, totally another person, Samuel, was called. His father was an Ephraimite from the town Ramah. His mother Hannah was barren. She besought the Lord for a son, vowing to dedicate him to Yahweh's service. Her petition was granted. Hannah kept her promise and entrusted Samuel to Eli, who asked also for a son. Who couldn't have a son?
In the Old Testament.
Ishmael's?
It's Sarah.
Sarah. And God promised Abram?
Yeah.
And it was?
Isaac was.
Isaac was born.
Yeah.
Now, if you go into the I'm not preaching out of it,
Yeah.
I'm just telling you. If you go into the Apocrypha books and read up about Mary, God's mother, God's mother's mother, she couldn't have people neither, children neither. But also God gave her also the ability, there was also a special child born. So the line of God was, Jesus was actually a very special line. Okay, it's not just given. So just please remember, this is not, I don't preach out of it, I'm just mentioning it. We take it in inverted commas. Okay, this is not biblical. That is about the Apocrypha. So we don't know if it's true and if it's not true. But it can be because of what is happening in the past. Johannes, was it no, Jacob?
Yeah.
Was also the same. Johannes, Jesus' what we call in English cousin. Yes, it was also the same. So yes, that happened right through the Old Testament. Like the woman couldn't bear children, but by begging God, they received it. They conceived a child. Okay, so yes, it does happen. Okay, so sure, petition was granted, and Hannah kept her promise and entrusted Samuel to Eli. So what happened? Before Eli even passed away with his children and the ark, Samuel was already born. But he didn't know that it would have been Samuel. But God said that He will open up what will happen. We will take it. So that was granted for him to know. Okay. So Samuel will take over. But see where Samuel came in and whose arms was he given into Eli that knew God. You see, so that branch of Eli that is was wrong, his children was out, but still he gave somebody else. God gave Samuel to be, to be in the arms of Eli, so that he knows the truth by God. Okay? So again, it is God's work. Yahweh revealed His rejection of the house of Eli to Samuel. That's exactly what I said now. The revelation established Samuel as a prophet in 1 Samuel 3 verse 11. Samuel served as the last judge of Israel, making a circuit each year from Ramah to Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, that we see in 1 Samuel 7 verse 16. So what he did as a judge, what their work was going to each place to make sure everything is right. Where it was by normally God looking over everything and will talk to one prophet or one person,
Yeah.
like Abram or, and he will say, listen, this and this and this, do this and this and this. And he will say to the Israelites, listen, God said we must do this. It was, but now God will, Samuel will go to zigzags all over to all the different places, the different Israelites. There were 12 branches, tribes. And he will see if everything is right or what's wrong and lay it in front of God and, things like that. So he did his rounds, as we would say, he did his rounds, okay? When the shrine fell into the hands of Philistines, Samuel returned to his throne in Ramah. There he called on the Israelites to repent of their sin of idolatry. Now what idolatry is that? Can you explain what idolatry is this?
I think something that you I'm not sure if I can say worship in the place of God.
Azai, idolatry. So they pushed God here one step and they got another God.
Yes.
So it's, we are the bride.
Mm-hmm.
And that bride now is actually idolatry. They went to somebody else. So that's exactly, they actually had idolatry against God.
Mm.
That is what we say.
Yeah.
His bride was idolatry against God. So Samuel told them, stop that.
Mm.
It's a sin.
Yeah.
Yahweh accepted their prayer, so they started praying because the Philistines was there and they suffered in the hands of the Philistines. So then, again, remember, said, we could see they go to God, God helped them, and then they make a sin again, and go. You know the pattern, okay? Yahweh accepted their prayers, and when the first was attacked, and Yahweh gave the Israelites miraculous deliverance.
Mm.
When the Philistines attack again,
Yeah.
God helped them again. They ask, and what a wonderful God,
Mm.
loving. What will you do with your son? You will give him hiding now.
Yeah.
Tomorrow he comes to you, Daddy, forgive me.
Yeah.
Sure, my child, anytime. You're not going to push him away.
Yeah.
And the same thing God is doing us, our Father. He's doing exactly the same.
Mm.
He loves us, but He loves us, we can do whatever.
Yeah.
If we come back and we really repent with our heart, He will take us back.
Mm.
Okay. That's in 1 Samuel 7, verse 3 to 11. Note, the flow of Israelite history in the development away from God's leadership. Now this is not in your books. I just mentioned it quickly in the development, what happened, up to what's happening actually, where we go on, but what is constantly still going on. We're moving further and further and further away from God. So we that's with God must know, if we can go back and just, strange enough, just this morning, me and my son came in and I told him, it's silent and everything. And if we can just get that silence to be with God and to listen to Him, and my son said, in that times there was not internet and television and all this cars and being busy with everything. You had your nature and your household and what you do in your house. Okay, we did some stuff in our house, but all your natural stuff, you had your natural, so you had more time for each other and you could concentrate your life around God. But Satan crawled in so deep in that everything we do these days, work and everything, is taking your concentration away from God. If we still can just have our concentration of God, the possibility is still there, because God didn't change, that we will be able, maybe not verbally, but we will hear Him. But on the other hand, Jesus said the Holy Spirit will lead us. Isn't it that the Holy Spirit maybe have a possibility to speak in our minds? Understand what I'm saying? But we don't want to listen to Him. We want to do what we want to do. But if we get silent in the presence of Christ, through the Spirit, maybe we will have the same thing. Yeah, we will have the same thing. It was actually a very nice discussion this morning between me and myself.
Okay.
So, we look at this diverted away from God. So that was it started in times before Abram. Then we look at the times of Abram, that is in the book, following in the book, you know, the times in the book.
Yeah.
Then the Israelites in the Egyptian bondage and deliverance.
Mm-hmm.
Then the areas that were occupied and the struggles they had with the areas where they were in. And then chapter 7, the times of the judges that we already went through. It started at the time. So they already struggled and they're going away from God. But if you see how it follows on each other further and further and further away. Now we're already going to the judges that we had with the last session. There was 30 judges. 6 people are classified and major judges, as we see. That was Othniel, Jacob, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, Samson. The 6 minor judges, and whom little is known as Shamgar, Tola, Jael, Absan, Elon, Abdon, Abimelech, the 30 judge that was self-proclaimed or appointed. That is where we stopped by the judges. Now they're not anymore happy with the judges.
Yeah.
No, they said, no, they're not happy anymore. They want now a monarch. Okay, so here we start with the establishment of the kingdoms. Samuel made an annual circuit with the judges, as I said, around the different places. When Samuel got too old, he appointed his 2 sons, as judges in Bathsheba. But his sons were dishonest and prevented justice for bribes. Perverted justice for bribes in 1 Samuel 8 verse 3 to 4. So, again, he used bribes. That was not what God said must happen. The sons again went wrong. Just like Eli's sons, Samuel's sons also went wrong.
Yeah.
So, Samuel's commitment was the covenant relationship with God. He went against that idea of a monarch, and he wanted to, he didn't want to establish a monarch. He was against that. And he told them the selection of a king will reject Yahweh. That is actually reigning at the moment over them. But God instructed Samuel to heed with them, and request what they give them what they requested. That we see in 1 Samuel 8 verse 7. Samuel warned them about the cost and supporting a king and his army, because now that king needs an army.
Yeah.
God's kingdom supported his own army. Because he just need to speak the word. You know what I'm saying? He don't need to tell his army, okay, now you must practice so many times, you must do. No. God did not need to do. But now, it will be the cost of the army that they need to practice and teach and whatever. And they want to support the king. That was not necessary with God. Okay? But they, no, they want the king. Okay, fine. They wanted the king to judge them justly. I won't say about God. They want the king to want to justly. We will just let it go. To fight the battles for them. Now what did God do? But never mind. 1 Kings 8 verse 20. They want 1 year to see them fighting their battles. God worked through someone else fighting their battles. One of the assignments of a king was to lead Israel's troops in battle. Therefore Samuel looked for a strong person with military ability and found Saul. And Saul met these qualifications. So he also said, Samuel said, the God's chosen servant was to lead his people. Yahweh's choice was revealed by Samuel, and Samuel proclaimed it to his people in 1 Samuel 9 verse 15. So Samuel anointed Saul with oil to sacrifice dedication to God. 1 Samuel 10 verse 16. Now remember, Samuel was also accepted by God down there. It was a dedication from God. So it's Samuel, Saul. King Saul, in 1 Samuel 10 verse 10, now remember Saul is now not just Saul anymore. Saul is now king.
Yeah.
Okay? So Samuel is said, okay, Saul is chosen, so Saul is king now. He's the first king. King. Okay. To be effective leader, the king needed to be endowed with God's spirit. So it's still good, eh?
Yeah.
The Spirit of God in Saul was manifested by his prophesying. So they could see, okay, now the Spirit is still with Saul. So we look at the work of Saul between 1020 and 1000 before Christ. That is when he lived. Saul was a Benjamite from Gibeah. He laid the foundation from the work of David. While waiting for Samuel to arrive, Saul made the peace offering. Now listen up quickly here. Saul was not supposed to make a peace offering. Okay? He was the king. He was not a prophet or priest or judge. He was the king. He was not supposed to do it. But he was waiting for Saul, so he thought, okay, now I will do it. After Samuel arrived, the prophet, priest, judge rebuked Saul and announced that the kingdom would not be established with his descendants. Just then they said, okay, fine, you went wrong. The kingdom is after you is gone. That we read in 1 Samuel 13 verse 30. Again, God said, okay, you were chosen, but now you went wrong.
Yeah.
It's gone. You didn't listen. There were numerous battles in his entire reign was spent in battles. He fought against all the enemies and every side against Moab, the children of Ammon, against the kings of Zobah, the Philistines, and he gathered and host and smote the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hand of them and spoiled them. In 1 Samuel 14 verse 47 to 48. Okay, now Saul's conflict with Samuel. Now it comes. Okay, Saul tried his own story. And Samuel decided, okay, but you are not doing it right. So now starts the first conflict.
Yeah.
Because Samuel is more God-orientated. And Saul decided, no, I'm not. I can do it on my own. So let's see what's going. Samuel was willing to relinquish his leadership as judge, but not as a prophet and priest. Samuel wants to stay a prophet and priest. Samuel's break with Saul came during a war with the Amalekites in the area of Beersheba. Saul refused to follow Samuel's instructions to destroy all of the people and livestock of the Amalekites. Now, as we know, if God tells you kill all of them, you kill all of them.
Yeah.
You don't take anything, you don't take anything. That's an order from God. That is it. And that was the order God gave me. Okay?
Yeah.
So, but when confronted by Saul, Saul claimed that he spared the best sheep and oxen to sacrifice to God. And Samuel reminded Saul to obey the Lord is better than to sacrifice something to God.
Exactly.
And remember that. To obey God is better to sacrifice. Remember that. Saul's disobedience of Yahweh's instructions given through Saul led that there's a rejection as a king. So that disobeyed God and they start rejecting Saul's kingdom.
Yes.
That is a king.
Mm-hmm.
Saul's thought of a king's function was politically and military, but he wanted the religious leadership to remain the function of the priests and the prophets who offered sacrifices and received God's revelation. Saul, that was Samuel, right? Saul was dependent on Samuel's knowledge of God's will and intended to gain both political and religious leadership, and that ended in failure and rejection. So Saul accepted that kingdom is kingdom,
Yeah.
Saul's, but the priesthood and the political priesthood and the priest is God's side. But Saul wanted God's side and the political side, and military side.
What?
He can't take both. It doesn't work like that. And therefore, there was a failure, and it was a rejection. This event was followed by the secret anointing of David as king. So, between all of that, they already told David, and anointed him as king. Because remember, David played in front of Saul.
So, yeah.
Okay, so he was there already. Now, okay, they started. Saul then had a conflict with David also. Saul experienced deep emotions and distress, and Saul did not see, and Samuel did not see Saul's anymore till the day of his death. So, in other words, Samuel, stay away from Saul. The two split. In 1 Samuel 15 verse 35. So, because of this distress, emotions, most probably depression, whatever we know the names today, this disturbances that he had, David's harp was actually pleasing him, so he listened to David's harp. That was a soothing music. And that he gained favor in court and was successful in whether his king commanded him to do. But in other words, in the king's court, David was favored. Now just think about you sitting in this beautiful place. You got your castle and this beautiful music. Don't you think it's nice? And you were depressed and really not happy. It's beautiful. So by that he was actually blessed, but it was very in favor of David was then in favor by the king, yes. Because of that, 1 Samuel 18 verse 5, and he did whatever the king asked him to do. Okay?
Yeah.
So David did what Saul asked him to do. By depending on Yahweh's guidance, David succeeded in slaying Goliath. We all know the story of Goliath.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And delivering the Israelites from the Philistines. David's popularity made Saul jealous. So here we come. He's got this, everything he had. He's a king. He's got all these fantastic things. And then he got jealous because of what happened. Because David was, people favored him. Saul tried to kill David with a javelin while David played the harp. You know what's a javelin? It's like a spear. I looked it up. Wait. Okay, I can't remember if I got it here.
I just know that in the Olympics there is that javelin that day. And
Yeah.
I don't know how you can play this instrument.
A javelin. Okay, here. Okay, sorry. No, I can just show you a bit pictures. I totally forgot about the pictures of them. That is the biblical Raham. That is where they found, okay, the place where it was. It's a biblical, it's still used. This is where it was, but the Silo is still, Raham is still in use today. But this is where actually the old biblical Raham is. There you can see where they built the old pieces onto the new. Here you can see. This is the old buildings and the new buildings into it.
Yeah.
That's the place. There you can see it very clearly. The old part and the new part building onto. Okay? They still use it. That's the new parts today. That's where it is. There you can see it's the old store. That's a photo over the new part. Raham. David spares Saul's life in 1 Samuel. Okay, we didn't come to there yet. Okay. So let's go on quickly. Where are we? Okay, so I didn't do a javelin, but as I say, it's like a spear. We would just say today it's a spear, no, like on the Olympics, they throw it. It's that type of thing. Okay. So Paul then designed a plan to have David killed by the Philistine battle. So Samuel offered David his elder daughter as wife in exchange for David fighting the Philistines. Who else did that fighting to get the wife?
I think to get the wife.
To kill the husband to get the wife.
Or David.
David did the same thing. So here, Paul put into put him in the Philistine battle to try and get David killed.
Yes.
But he offered his older daughter to fight the Philistines. So, he said, okay, I will give my daughter if you fight the Philistines, but in the other lines he wanted to get killed. But it didn't work. David kept his part of the agreement against the Philistines, but Saul betrayed him and he gave that daughter to someone else. His daughter's name was Merab, and to another person to it. So when he came back, he said, no, I gave her away. So he thought, most probably thought, he's not going to come back alive. But he did. So, again, oops, I'm going back. I'm on the wrong screen. I must come back to my screen. Again, Saul enticed David into his snare and death by offering him a second daughter, Michal. Okay, so again, the wedding dowry was to be evidence of the death of 100 Philistines. So again, he pushed David again into a fight. If he can kill the 100 Philistines, he will get his second daughter. David gained victory over the Philistines and was given Saul's second daughter as a wife. So he tried again and it didn't work. Saul's failure to kill David increased and hatred of the successful young man grew. So every time he's successful, the hatred grew even more. He influenced his son Jonathan and the troops under him to kill David. But Jonathan and David were good friends, so it didn't work. 1 Samuel 16, verse 18. David escaped to Samuel at Ramah. Okay? That is Ziklag. We spoke about Ziklag also already. Oh, where's my mouse? Now I'm leaving my car. Where's my mouse? Do you see my mouse there? Where's my mouse? Okay. There we go. Just for interest sake, here's the Ziklag. When they fight and everything. It's the Amalekites that they're speaking about all the time. Coming down the Ziklag. I don't think we spoke of Ziklag yet, eh? Ziklag. I also found the place. David's palace. We had it previously on the previous photos. Also, there's other photo of the palace. Yeah, there's Hebron. No, we didn't go there yet. So. David was there. I think Ramah was. I also showed it here, on the previous chapters. David was divinely protected from Saul's servants. Saul's jealousy led to insanity, and Saul cast a spear meant for David at his own son Jonathan. So he tried to kill David, and he killed his own son. In 1 Samuel 20 verse 24. David faked insanity until he had the opportunity to escape. So yeah, he's now crazy. But he had the chance to escape. David feared for the safety of his parents because his parents also stayed in that same area. Okay, maybe I must just move my cursor back. Okay, where am I? That way, that way. And okay, here we go. Okay. His ancestors included Boaz, whose wife was the Moabite Ruth. Now you know Ruth, and Ruth 4 verse 10 to 22. Everybody knows Ruth. David went to his king in Moab and requested refuge for his parents. He formed a fighting force of 400 men, and we're going to go on getting our lights on. Load shedding time. His ancestors, okay, we got that. He formed a fighting force of 400 men from the distressed persons, malcontents and fugitives who joined him. He and his troops survived by raiding the Philistines and by demanding support from wealthy citizens. So 1 Samuel, that's in 1 Samuel 23, 25 to 79 and 15 to 17. He became a fugitive to the Rak mountain in Judah, living in caves. Now if you remember, Earlier on, also in the previous, I can't show it now, but there was also, I showed you where those holes was in the mountains where he stayed all the time. I had pictures before also. He was joined by others by experiences, distress and anger from the hands of Saul. So there was quite a lot of others also coming in now. The Saul survivor of the priests who had been slaughtered at Nob fled to David. In 1 Samuel 22 verse 22-23. Saul's acts alienated the priesthood. So there the priesthood is going. Okay. Saul also caused Israel's weakened defense against the Philistines. There, okay, there's the military also going. The defense is also going.
Yeah.
Saul sent him to encounter David in Keilah, but David's department to stronghold is in the wilderness. 1 Samuel 23:8. So David still departed to the stronghold. So he's still there in the wilderness. David died in the wilderness in Zephyr, but the people of the area betrayed him and told the king where he is. David departed from the wilderness to another area and was pursued by Saul, whose troops surrounded and almost trapped David and his forces in 1 Samuel 26 and 25. In the wilderness of En-Gedi, Saul entered a cave where David and his men were hiding. So now this is quite interesting because I could show you, and maybe next week I'll just show you the photos before load shedding. So my TV is not working. So Saul entered the cave where David and his son were lying, sleeping there, hiding. Okay, so in the wilderness in En-Gedi, Saul entered the cave, and his men were hiding in that cave. David could kill Saul, but he only cut off a piece of his skirt, of the robe that he was wearing while he was sleeping. Saul was sleeping, and he left him. In the wilderness of Ziph, Saul did the same. His troop was sleeping there again. David and his servants slipped in there. Servant Abishai slipped into the camp and took Saul's spear and a jug of water. So he could kill them again because Saul was sleeping there. Again, he could have killed him there too. So on the one hand, David's and his men was in the one cave hiding, and then Saul went to sleep there and he cut off his robe. On the other hand, there was Saul's troops were sleeping, and David and Abishai went in there. And they could have killed him and took just his spear and the water. So yeah. But why did David do that? Because David saw Saul as anointed from God.
Yeah.
And he will not raise his hand against him. David plundered the Geshurites, the Gerzites, the Gerizzites, the Amalekites, who had harassed southern clans of Israel by frequent raids. Now, we go further and we see the end of Saul's reign. The Philistines attacked the Israelites at Epic. Israelites' force were defeated. Saul's 3 sons were killed. Again, there the sons is killed. So that one is also out. As we had by Eli, his sons was killed. Okay? So Saul's sons is also killed. Saul was seriously wounded and he took his own life in 1 Samuel 31. So there he's also gone. The Philistines cut off his head and hung him together with his bodies of his sons on the wall of Bethshan. Saul and his sons were given a decent burial by a man of Jabesh Gilead, who at great risk secretly stole their bodies. Now come and look at the evaluation of Saul's reign. What happened all? His entire reign has been spent at war and his attempts to destroy David. He had established some national authority and had freedom of movement throughout the country. He had come to power as a charismatic hero. His tasks were primarily those of a judge who maintained justice and of a charismatic military leader who rallied the people against the enemy. But the people continued in tribal organization without the development of a strong central administration by the king. So there's no officials in his court other than his cousin Abner, who commanded troops from various tribes. He had no splendid and extravagant court at the simple headquarters of Gibeah. He did enlist young soldiers and established a standing army. He is uncertain how he supported his army other than by gifts and booty. With other words, he didn't do anything else as gifts and where they get stuff, raid stuff by people where they killed, that type of thing. And his reign marked a transition in Israel's structure from judge to king. Okay, that's the first one. Saul did not always submit to the demands of the religious leaders, but occasionally asserted the supremacy of the political military monarch. Saul prepared the way for the development of centralized government and separations from the function of the church and state. He laid the foundation for greater days for the Israelite nation and provided a degree of protection from the Amalekites and the Philistines. So now we step over to the reign of David. Because now remember, he's already anointed as king.
Yes, king, yes.
He's already anointed. So David reigned between 1000 to 961 before Christ. David was the descendant of Boaz and a Moabite, Ruth. So we go back again to Ruth.
Yes.
His father was Jesse of Bethlehem in Judah. He was a shepherd in his youth and came to prominence when he slew Goliath and became the personal attendant of Saul. He was anointed by Samuel as king. So again it was Samuel, not Saul. Samuel anointed him. But he refused to take steps to securing the throne before Saul's death. He and his 600 followers established a small dynasty at Ziklag. That was the following thing that was supposed to show you what it looked like in Ziklag, where this happened. During the alliance which Achish of Gath and David residence in Ziklag, he and his troops were able to dispose of elements in the southern area of Judah. David and his forces were absent from Ziklag, and his city was raided and burned to the ground by the Amalekites. It's quite interesting to see, that if you think about it, it was burned down. That place they got it. David went for the Amalekites and overtook them and rescued Judean families and possessions and took additional spoils of war from them. He distributed those spoils of the Amalekites to the elders of Judah. David went over to the Philistines, so he didn't keep it for himself. He gave it again. David reigned in Hebron. We got that also. The consider you see my nice lights. That's Hebron, right? After Saul and Jonathan death, David took up residence in Hebron, and there he was anointed king. So officially anointed.
Just reminded, sorry about that. When I was at college, when we were doing our presentation, it happened that the power went off also, and then we had to write the notes on the small piece of paper. Then when you are just talking now about your topic, then you just be saying, "Oh, I had it on my slide there, but unfortunately you can't see it."
Can't speak further.
Just reminded me of that.
Well, we had, it was, lucky not this one, I got the battery. Otherwise I would have said, "Oh man, sorry, I can't go on." So anyway, okay, so David was anointed king over the territory of Judah in 2 Samuel 2 verse 4. David enhanced his relation with those who had been loyal to Saul. David was more of a tribal ruler in Judah. His authority included Simeonites, Calebites, Ophir-Meelites, Jerahmeelites, and Kenites. Not Canaanites, Kenites. 1 Samuel 27, 10, verse 30, 14, Judges 1 to 1 to 20, 1 to 12, 21. Abner, Saul's general, and Ishbosheth. Abner set up Ishbosheth at Mahanaim as successor of his father. Just now, Saul's father. Now remember, that is his general, right?
Yeah.
2 Samuel 2 verse 8 to 10. Ishbosheth reigns 2 years over Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and other parts of Israel. Ishbosheth lacked the qualification for being a king, namely divine election, demonstration of powers, popular assent by the people. So there's not a different divine selection there. So he sort of, I don't know if he self-proclaimed him, because then there's a popular assent by the people, so he most probably decided he's taking it himself. Ishbosheth claimed to rule all Israel, but he had no real authority or control over the people and territory. The original kingdom of Judah remained loyal to David's grandson, Rehoboam. So there you can see it's a conflict. David's strategy of gaining control of all Israel relied on diplomacy rather than war.
Yeah.
What do we have? A diplomatic in South Africa? You are with each other. Right?
Yes.
Okay. David took in marriage the daughters of the Aramean king of Geshur. Though this, he formed a political alliance with the state northeast of the Sea of Galilee. He entered friendly relations with Ammon and thus had Ishbosheth surrounded with allies. With the negative relations of Abner and the killing of Eshal and the good standing of David, that proved his innocence was an action that emphasized respect for the appointed monarch and discouraged future disloyalty. So that nice personality of rather incorporate everybody.
Yes.
Like we have in South Africa, it's all over our 13 nations, we work all together. That it's better to work all together as to fight everybody. And that's exactly the same example that he did here. All these different places he incorporated in his kingdom.
Yeah.
And it was peaceful, and there was there was no disloyalty. It discouraged the future of a disloyalty. They were all together, and that is what we do in South Africa, working together. We've got a lot of different cultures, but we're working, putting all into one law. We're working together. This is a very nice, actually, example of what happened there. David's rule of all Israel. And to say about the 13 different cultures, that's not, it is not included the other new cultures that came in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not the new cultures.
Yeah.
We've got now the Congolese, the Zimbabweans, and the Nigerians that came in the meantime. So that's adding up more cultures that came into it. So yeah. There is no indication that Judah and Israel became united other than in the person of the king who ruled over both kingdoms. David ruled 2 years over Judah, and then they made him king of Israel as well. So he's got Judah now and Israel.
Yeah.
Not only one of them. He ruled in Hebron a total of 7.5 years. David's forces conquered the city of Jerusalem and came to be known as the city of David. 2 Samuel 5 verse 8 and 2 Chronicles 11 verse 6. Now what was nice, Judah was on one side and Israel was on one side, and Jerusalem was in the middle. So they could go from one city to the other city, and Jerusalem, you can go through Jerusalem, the middle city. So what is the best city for the main city? Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And then it's still today. Jerusalem is the main city. So, and David became king, and the Philistines prepared for a battle because the two kingdoms had hampered their trade routes through Jerusalem.
Okay.
The Philistines prepared the battle in the valley of Rephaim, but David defeated them in Baal Perazim. The Philistines attacked them in second time in the valley of Rephaim, but David was divinely guided to attack the camp from the rear and thus gained a significant victory. He pursued them northwestward as far as Gezer, and the Philistines did not attempt to invade the hill country again in 2 Samuel 22 verse 25. So even the Philistines decided, okay, no, this is enough. I'm not going to try again. Jerusalem remained in the hands of the Jebusites and belonged to neither of the two kingdoms. Isn't that nice? Because no one can claim it.
Yes.
A natural and well-fortified site, Jerusalem was ideal for a common capital city of the two kingdoms. Not one of them claimed it, so it's a capital city of the two kingdoms joined together. David's religious policy. David did not destroy the Jebusites during his conquest of Jerusalem, but incorporated them into the Israelite society. David transferred the Ark of the Covenant from Kiriath-Jearim to a tent prepared for the capital city. Now, Jerusalem, as we know still today, is Jerusalem, the main city, and the Ark, the Covenant Ark, we took to there, to the main city. The Ark was neglected for a number of years, and David appointed Abiathar, the son of Abimelech, to serve the priest in Jerusalem. Who was Abimelech? 13th judge that proclaimed himself. Okay, that was a 13th judge. We do not know who and where the ancestor of Abiathar is. The ark served as a symbol of unity for the two tribes of their deliverance from Egypt and their entering into the covenant in Mount Sinai. So the tribes will come out and still keep that ark of the covenant, just keep them together, joining them. By taking the ark to Jerusalem, David made Jerusalem the religious center as well as the political capital of the empire, and to link the newly created state of Israel, previously political and religious structures under Moses. So he took everything back under Moses. And who, again, we say again, what are we looking at now? We know, everybody know Israel and Jerusalem. We know that. Till today. A first attempt to bring the ark to the city of David was unsuccessful, but they placed it by the house of Obed-Edom. And he was specially blessed because of the ark presence. Thus, David's second effort succeeded in bringing the ark into the city of David. David demonstrated his enthusiasm for Jehovah by dancing and leaping before the ark. The excitement to have the ark in Jerusalem. The ark that actually was with them all the time. His actions revealed the recognition for dependence on Yahweh for a succession reign. He included a priest among the officials and his governments, 2 Samuel 8:15. David was not allowed to build a temple for it, but he kept it in a tabernacle. So it was the tent. Why wasn't he officially allowed to build the temple?
Too much blood
on his hands. So who will build it? He said, God said? Solomon will build it. The expansion of the empire. David brought the Canaanites, city-states under submission, and was incorporated into David's empire. They did not merge into Israel tribes. So the Canaanites didn't merge into the tribes, okay? Many Israelites were drawn into the Canaanite worship of Baal and other fertility gods. And there we go again. Okay? So he didn't say the Israelites would come to the Canaanites would come to the Israelites, but some of the Israelites went to the Canaanite gods. I know. Deities and Yahwism, the prophets struggled to keep the ancestral Canaanite faith of Israel alive and pursue pagan influences. David turned to the Moabites and Edomites and treated them with brutality in 1 Samuel 22, 2-6 and 1 Samuel 8 verse 30. So here he's coming, he really is now brutal. David also defeated the Arameans in 2 Samuel 10 verse 15. David became involved in a shameful affair with Bathsheba and her husband Uriah, 2 Samuel 11, 2-12-25. And there he went wrong. Yeah. And there we start with the see what God did. The defeat of the Arameans resulted in a peace treaty in which they had become subjects of David. After the fall of Rabbah, the inhabitants were reduced to slavery. The Ammonites' king's crown was placed on David's head, signifying that he is also the king of the Ammonites. David ruled for extended from Egypt to Mesopotamia, so now it's a bit bigger. The rule is bigger. He became the most powerful king in the world in these days. He was the most powerful king. So in today's days, who's the Richard king? In today's days, it's the British monarch. Okay? As now King Charles. Okay? The third. It's the British. That is the most powerful monarch in the world today. Okay? He had become, the conquest brought great wealth in the luxury of Jerusalem. But, let's see, David's decline. What happened? After the affair with Bathsheba, David's glorious reign began to decline. Because he went to do something that God did not. That was totally against God's will.
Yes.
A son was born to Bathsheba, but died. We all know the story about that.
Yeah.
But he got another son. And that we don't always think of. David got another son by Bathsheba. Come see. Another son was born after David, supposed of Uriah, and he married Bathsheba. His son Solomon was to succeed David through he was not David's oldest son. In other words, he had other wives, as we know, and he had other sons by them. Yeah. There was older sons as the ones that Bathsheba had. The first son from Bathsheba died, but she had a second son.
Yeah.
Solomon come from Bathsheba's son.
Yes.
Not from the other.
Not from the other, yeah.
So Solomon is coming from Bathsheba's second son. Okay. David married sons by numerous wives. While he was on the battlefield, his family deteriorated because of jealousy and engaged in intrigues and feuds. So yeah, there we go again. Wealth provided by David's conquest added to his indulgences and David's irresponsible sons. There they go. Same as all the big Eli and all coming down the same thing. David's sons did exactly the same. Absalom was crown prince and the beloved son of David. But listen what happened. Oh, guys. There everything go. We come back. Absalom was crown prince and the beloved son of David. So, but listen what happened. Tamar, Absalom's sister, was violated by their half-brother Amnon. Now, if you look at the whole situation, in my master thesis, I had this as an abuse thing, and what God did afterwards with Amnon and what happened there. It's quite an interesting story if you start working it out and see what's happening in sexual abuse. Yeah. After 2 years, Absalom took a revenge and killed Amnon. So that was now Tamar's brother was Absalom, was her biological brother. But the half-brother violated the promise of Tamar, and Absalom killed Amnon. So Absalom then ran away, went in exile for 2 years in Geshur. Absalom and David reconciled. Absalom secretly met with the disenchanted of Israel and sowed further discontent. Further discontentment. Absalom received permission to proceed to Hebron, we had the photos, where he was proclaimed king and initiated a revolt against David. Now, after everything, David didn't kill him.
Yeah.
After he was gone, everything, but he survived go and he revolt against David. David recognized it serious and he fled to Jerusalem. David left some of his royal servants in Jerusalem to carry out subversions against Absalom. David went across the Jordan to Mahanaim, where Ishbosheth had resided and where David found loyal friends. So now he went to Ishbosheth, remember?
Yeah.
Joab led David's forces and went. Now listen this one very carefully. Joab led David's forces, and with this approaching confrontation, Absalom become entrapped in the forks of a tree. Now just listen. With other words, they didn't say he was killed in that forks of the tree. So Joab put him to death. He wasn't killed. Joab thought, okay, I'm going to put you to death. Rather than taking him captive. In 2 Samuel 20 verse 1 to 22. If Absalom didn't go against his father and he started with his revolt against his father, he would have been killed. Okay? Absalom uprising shows that not all Israel accepted David, so there was also people against David. Before that happened, there was another. Before this happened, there was another uprising under Sheba, the Benjaminite, and David. 2 Samuel 20, verse 1 to 22. David appointed Amasa as leader for Absalom's army to putting down the uprising of Sheba under Joab, but he failed, and Joab stabbed Amasa and led the army to victory. David's political policies and court. David built an empire by binding each conquered territory to himself. There were no taxation system to support the court and army. That's through David, eh? Judicial matters continued to be handled primarily by leaders of tribes. However, subjects could appeal to the king. 2 Samuel 14 verse 1 to 24. David had a large household. Most of his marriages appear to have had political and economical implications. David's marriage to Merab, daughter of Saul, would have given him some claim to the throne of Israel. Now, as we know, this political economical implications is if you take a daughter from certain people, kings, then there's a little bit of a political thing. It's not to say that they love the woman. You know what I'm saying? Okay. The marriage is Maacah, daughter of the king of Geshur, placed him in a line of hire to that small kingdom northeast of the Sea of Galilee. Just see what they do. Be friends and marriage the princesses and you got a chance. And Maacah was Absalom's mother. David's marriage to Bathsheba. She was the mother of Solomon. After David moved to Jerusalem, other sons and daughters were born to concubines and wives of David. 2 Samuel 5 verse 3 to 16. Following the pattern of Egypt, David reduced some of the conquered to slavery. So here he going to the pattern of Egypt, and he started slavery. After conquering of Rabbah, David made the citizens, 2 Samuel 12 verse 3, labor with saws and iron picks and iron axes, and made them toil at the brick kilns. Now I don't exactly understand it work. I looked it up and I couldn't find it. And thus he did to all the cities of the Ammonites. So there it was also things that he wasn't supposed to do. Okay, now unfortunately, 2 Samuel 24:7 and 2 Samuel 24:9 see the map. Beautiful, the map is here on the screen. You can see
Yes,
the map.
yes.
So you see the map here?
Yeah.
Okay, so just imagine you see the map. That will take another
page, right?
Yeah, beautiful. So 4 lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, see the map. So we're going to skip that map for first because look at that later again. So David's successor. David's first and third son died, namely Amnon and Absalom. David's second son was just mentioned on a listing named shall leap. So we don't know actually what happened to him. Okay? Next in line was Adoniah. He became ambitious to occupy the throne before David's death. He was next in line, but David promised the throne to Bathsheba's son Solomon. Adoniah gained support from Joab, David's general, and the priest Abiathar. The priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, and Benaiah, who served the captain of the royal guard, supported Solomon. Adoniah invited his brothers and other dignitaries to a feast in Rogel, where he was proclaimed king in 1 Kings 1 verse 9. But when his visitors heard Solomon's reception, they depart from Adoniah. So Solomon also had a reception. They said, oh, whoa. That king is a bigger king. So it's a bigger story. It's a nicer party. So Adoniah fled to the tabernacle. He knew, okay, wait. Yes, now, here's something going on now. Very seriously. My father also gave a party now, and this is not serious because he's also king. He fled to the tabernacle, laid hold of the horns of the altar. You know, the altar had the horns of the four corners, so he grabbed them and pleaded for his life to be spared. Solomon did not slay him in the tabernacle and granted his request in the tabernacle while he was holding it. But when Adoniah asked for Abishag, the beautiful maiden who had been selected to serve David during his old age, Adoniah was put to death. Nathan and other supporters of Solomon was not invited to that party, like I say it like that. Yeah. Nathan discussed with Bathsheba concerning steps to get David to declare Solomon as his successor in 1 Kings 1 verse 18. David sent Zadok to anoint Solomon at Gihon in 1 Kings 1 verse 32. David's last will called for the death of Joab to avenge his murdering Abner, Amasa, and Absalom. It was his sons. He killed them. Remember? David died after ruling Judah 40 years and Israel 33 years. Then he died. Okay? It's a long time. The evaluation of David's reign. David has been honored as the greatest king of Israel's history by controlling his personal ambitions to replace Saul. David's early conduct was beyond reproach. He was loyal to his king, even when Saul was contriving to put him to death. David was a smart diplomat and an able warrior. While dwelling in exile with the Philistines, he laid foundations which aided him later in building an empire. His defeats of Goliath and the Philistines on numerous occasions provided his military progress. By the time of Saul's death, David had united the leaders of Judah behind himself. He lamented over the death of Saul and Jonathan and did much to break down the resistance of Saul's followers towards him. As a politician, David entered into numerous alliances and sealed them with marriages. He used the religious sentiment of the people to achieve political ends. However, many of his religious activists reflect genuine piety. The moving of the ark to Jerusalem helped to bind the tribes to help and to his capital. Tribes to himself and his capital. He respected the priests and made them part of his cabinet. It's not the priest is there and he's here. He made it part of him. He was rebuked by prophets, but also turned to prophets for guidance and inspiration. So he was also helped, the prophets helped him also. He sought the counsel of God before entering battle. Isn't that fantastic? Yeah. David's reputation as a musician and priest was established at an early date. He gave a beautiful lament concerning Saul and Jonathan in 2 Samuel 1, verse 19 to 27. Numerous psalms are attributed to him. David built upon the foundations laid by Saul and constructed a great empire. His reign was not without problems, but there is no comparison between the wealth, power, and dignity of his kingdom and the Israelites under the judges less than 50 years before. David made Jerusalem the holy city of Israel, and it later became the holy city of Judaism and Christianity. And this is the close of chapter 8. It was a very long chapter.
Yeah, very.